All right, so we are back. Peanut Gallery. We're talking about some heckling. What are we talking about?
All right, great. So I am going to propose something, and this is going to be a sort of, I guess, what-if scenario. Because I like to do what-if scenarios every now and then. And our what-if scenario is going to be on which major professional wrestler should take over the reins of AEW's creative. And I'm going to make the case, I think, that Chris Jericho is the best choice for this. Now,
Okay.
I'm going to talk about the pros and the cons of having someone like Chris Jericho becoming the head of creative. So,
If Jericho's going to do this, before you even remotely get into this, if Jericho's going to be the guy that takes over head of creative, he has to fully retire from in-ring competition.
Yes, he does. Absolutely, 100%. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of people who are the heads of creative of various promotions throughout the world, even WWE,
that are successful,
happen to be former professional wrestlers. Now, you could have gotten away with something like this in the past, where, of course, the McMahons,
Eric Bischoff in WCW,
they were not wrestlers, but they were the heads of creative.
McMahon is a different case because Vince McMahon is not only a third-generation booker, but also his father worked with a former wrestler in Tootsmont.
Right, but
and that's
also,
what we
he
talked
also
about.
himself was a professional wrestler in some capacity for many years.
Not with WWF because his dad would not allow him to.
No, like within the WWE.
Right, but
Like
McMahon was already booking wrestling way before that.
Exactly. So I'm going to talk about the prospects of having someone who is a current wrestler taking over as creative, because obviously it's very well documented at this point that Tony Khan just cannot. He cannot.
It's not working.
It's not working. Ever since Cody Rhodes left the promotion, because I think that Cody Rhodes was pulling a lot of the strings.
He was a nucleus. He was a nucleus of AEW, and him leaving leaves a huge cog in there. And the thing was that not only is Cody Rhodes a second-generation wrestler, but he is essentially a second-generation booker because Dusty was also a booker.
Right. I mean, he booked early NXT.
And WCW.
Right, and WCW. I mean, there comes a point in time when you have to have some sort of wrestling experience to really understand how to book wrestling. And I think that Hunter does it really well because, of course, he's
been in the business for so long.
Exactly.
I mean, he wrestled in WCW in the late 80s. That's where he was terrorizing.
Right.
But also, he was trained by one of the best in the world, Killer Kowalski. He was around Vince McMahon for such a long time as an executive.
And as, of course, son-in-law, I mean, you can't deny that the family also has a lot to do with his development, and of course that kind of rubbed off on Shawn Michaels. But we're not talking about Shawn Michaels. We're not talking about Triple H. We're talking about the possibility of Chris Jericho becoming the I think, in my opinion, the most ideal head of creative of AEW.
There he is.
And there's a couple of reasons why, and I want to go over a couple of these pros.
I'm going to disagree with you, but continue.
Okay, so first of all, Chris Jericho experience. He has a lot of experience as a professional wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
Inside of the ring, of course, he has the bulwark of singles, of tag team, of factional success, just as a wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
Also, he has won titles of many different promotions in many different eras. He understands how to build yourself as a character up into those main event spots. And his third major strength is he is constantly reinventing himself as a character. So in terms of character development, he would absolutely excel in building and at least helping to build these long-term storylines.
Okay.
Now, cons, of course, we have talked about his ego. He, if you want to prevent as much ego as possible, he has to retire. He has to. We cannot have a current wrestler running booking. That just does not work.
We see that with Ultimo Guerrero right now. He is the head of creative, and yet he was still the world champion forever. I understand because Ultimo Guerrero was uber popular, but why was he the booker? That just doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. We saw that with Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash.
We saw that with Invader 3 after he fucking killed a guy. He was the head of creative in Puerto Rico, and he still had a career for 30-plus years after the murder.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, we have to separate out the booker from from the wrestler. Now, let's talk about, like, you know, for example, like there are a lot of other wrestlers who are bookers as well, like Jado and stuff.
This is the only wrestler.
Oh, absolutely.
I think here's my thing, and I'm gonna say this right. I would choose Dustin Rhodes over Chris Jericho.
Oh, really? Okay.
As booker. Here's my thing. Because Dustin Rhodes worked a lot close. He worked closer with his father than Cody did, and Cody already had the mind for booking wrestling. And I think Dustin Rhodes, despite him only reinventing himself maybe once or twice, I'll be honest with you, did it better than Chris Jericho.
Okay.
Because he created Goldust to what it was. Nobody else could have pulled that off other than him, and he managed to keep Goldust so relevant for so many years, even when he left and came back and left and came back. He had his issues, obviously, back in the day with Black Rain and all of that stuff, but he's a lot better now. And then now with this pseudo-natural, people are excited to still see him to this day. He has a longevity career, and he also has that second-generation booker that I think he would be a much greater benefit overall.
He would be the one that you could see leave the ring earlier than Chris Jericho
as
well.
Yes, exactly.
Because, of course, we say that, current wrestlers cannot be, but, you know, Jado and Gato, who are the head bookers for New Japan Pro Wrestling,
they wrestle.
They're not really, like,
they wrestle
wrestling.
so sporadically that I barely, realize, oh shit, they still actively compete in some sort of capacity.
Right.
They're just out there. Ego doesn't get in the way. I feel like with Chris Jericho, and this is no disrespect to Chris Jericho, I feel like there might be some ego there. But Dustin Rhodes, I feel like he already knows that his time has come and gone. I feel like he would be more synergized as it relates to that, where, hey, I'm willing to put on the boots and do all of that for the sake of a storyline without being in the main event for a world title.
Now,
that just wouldn't make sense.
Here's the only reason why I did not pick him. I think is because of the connection that, of course, he has with his half-brother, Cody, who is, of course, working for, quote, the enemy, and who was presumably seen as the, quote, enemy by Toni.
Well, if Tony's going to be that, that's not a Dustin issue, that's a Tony issue, and he needs to get over that.
Of course, we have to also talk a little bit about QT Marshall, who is the current head of live events, as another potential candidate for head of booking.
I will make this fairly brief, and this is nothing against QT. I don't think he would. I don't think he would be good with creative.
Okay, and your reason for that?
I think he would be better as the head trainer. Because that is where he thrives.
Right.
He is. I like QT.
Like something like a Triple H circa 2013. Like he needs a little more experience backstage, and then maybe he graduates once someone like Dustin Rhodes.
QT already wrestles very sporadically because he already does the factory stuff.
Right.
And it's like, it's not a developmental. The factory is essentially a school. It's developmental.
Yeah, the factory is developmental.
I think that QT is much better served as the trainer and possibly a gimmick maker than anybody. Now, if you want a person that would be like a great person for gimmick and stuff like that, it would be a Chris Jericho.
Absolutely.
I feel like that would be a much better position for him than it would be for head of creative.
An assistant, perhaps.
Right, exactly. That's kind of where I see it.
But at the end of the day,
it's Tony.
It's Tony, man.
Tony is a guy who makes the final decisions, and albeit tonight was good. I liked All Out.
And we'll talk about
there
that
are
when we get
issues.
to All Out.
I watch the show every fucking Wednesday and every Friday, and I've been doing that, and I'll continue to do that. And people are seeing. They're seeing chinks in the armor. They're seeing cracks in the wall.
Like if you really want to know whether or not the honeymoon phase, it's
the honeymoon phase is dead. It's dead and buried.
It was dead for a half a year, and we predicted it.
Cody was the nucleus that was keeping that honeymoon phase alive, and as soon as he left, that's when we saw issues.
Right.
Correlation was a causation here.
Yeah, and I wanted to kind of keep it relevant because, of course, we're heckling. We want to know kind of what the hell is going on. Obviously, there is a lack of direction from. We saw with Vince up until very recently, where if you are not actively a wrestler or actively involved in some capacity as an active wrestler within the industry, you lose touch with the crowd. And so what we're trying to provide is an avenue where AEW could be successful under a different creative direction. And I said that Chris Jericho would be perfect for it. And you think that Dusty Rhodes might even be better. And I tend to agree and have QT Marshall in there as some sort of, direction. Because right now, it's a ship without a rudder. There's no direction. Where is it going? What is AEW doing with itself? But we're going to talk a little bit more about the direction of AEW when we get to that point. But before that, we're going to talk about something from Wrestling Lesson. What is that going to be?
So we're going to be talking about the WWF's relationship with the United Kingdom as a whole. They talked about the Stadium show, but let's talk about the other one. So when we come back, we're going to talk about that.